Actors of Reddit, what are the conversations like when you're talking in the background of a scene but can't be heard? Story 1. I was an extra in a movie during a talking scene. I was in the background with lots of other people talking and the director told us to say the sound woo over and over but make your facial expressions look like you're conversing. So the person I was talking to and I were just going woo woo wo woo, woo woo woo, woo woo, etc. The movie I was in was called Threat by Matt Pizzolo. Edit. Just woke up to see the reaction to my reply, holy. Story 2. I actually did background for a year or so when I first moved to LA. The conversations run a gamut. Much of the time you don't actually say anything, you're just mouthing words. Other times you'll just say inane things like watermelon over and over. Rare, but it does happen, but a lot of the time you're just talking to the other background. It doesn't matter what you're saying as long as you keep your voices low and don't break character visually. So you're just chatting. Granted, most of these people are one-day friends from diverse, artistic backgrounds, so often your topics will get really weird, really fast. The fact itself that you're on set leads to much of the conversational hilarity. For example, one time I was working on a big crime procedural show and we were doing a rain scene outside of a murder victim's house. So me and two other background actors are huddled off to one side of the set under these big rain machines suspended from cranes. Right before they would call action, rain on, then cut, rain off, all we have to do is stay under our umbrella and look gossipy. And we're golden, but of course we're chatting, and to hear each other over the water we had to project a little, even standing 2 feet away from each other. And we're having a conversation about one of the lead actors on the show, a very famous masculine action star, and making very racy puns about him, because, it was 3 in the morning and we're standing out in the fake rain and we were a little punch drunk, and this is what you talk about with new actor friends. They called cut on the latest take, and immediately the assistant director calls over his bullhorn background, "Be quiet, we didn't think anything of it." They'd been saying that for a few takes no matter how low we tried to get our voices, but then he added the mics are pointing right at you, we shut up immediately. If one of the parabolic mics was indeed pointed in our direction, then a lot of the crew could hear all the butthole zingers we'd been coming up with about their star. Hoopsie. Story 3. I'm a pianist for musical theater, not an actor, but, in the show breaking up is hard to do. There's a scene where an actor is talking directly to the audience and then the scene flips to other characters talking backstage. As the scene flips, the actor's mic fades out, he turns around to face directly at me, and continues to improvise a monologue for about a half minute or so. Every night, it got more and more ridiculous. One night, it was just a stream of never-ending profanity. Thankfully, he chose not to go with that on any actual performances. Our sound crew isn't always on top of things and that would not have gone over well. Story 4. Did background as a job for a year. Sometimes we were hungry and talked about food, or sometimes we had whole fake lives. Once me and Guy caught up and talked about our divorces. Another time I make up stories is your sister still on meth, when they couldn't hear me ill. On Riverdale me and group of friends talked about the whole time because it was 16-hour day and we were bored. Story 5. You generally mouth the words only as they don't want you picked up on the mic from the actual dialogue going on. If you watch background actors you see them nod a lot at each other and agreeing. Rarely anyone looks like they are having a real heart-to-heart talk. Story 6. I did a promo as a background actor for the mother of a girl I liked who was directing. I didn't know that I was supposed to be miming talking, not making any actual sounds. Every time she stopped and said how she could still hear me through the sensitive mics I would just talk lower, but it wasn't working. I still feel bad about that. Story 7. I watched a him and noticed one of the extras at McLaren's. I read her lips, she was hot. Sumi, so you're a background artist. A background artist. You're in the background. Update S6E5 around 0347. Story 8. Most of the time you just move your lips, pantomiming. What sells the background acting are the gestures, usually small, that make it seem like you and the person you're paired up with are friends and having a good time in the scene you are in. A lot of the time you're listening to the principal actor's dialogue because you may have a cue to exit, cross, or enter on, and those actors whisper talk because they are microphoned, so it's hard to hear them, you have to pay attention to them and where the cameras are. The top 2 shows, filmed in LA, that are challenging for background actors to work on are 1, Westworld and 2, Code Black. Watch these shows and pay close attention to the background actors in these. They are working their butts off, generally 10 to 14 hours a day. Story 9. This makes me want to do in writing prompts where 2 movie extras keep meeting and having fake conversations and fall in love only to find out that they aren't anything like their fake extra selves. Story 10. During the party scene of The Sound of Music, the actor playing Captain Von Trapp would walk to each of our little groups and greet us say something ridiculous, completely in character while the children talked to Maria downstage. The most memorable was when he said something like, "I've been the Baroness all night, and my penis is so sore," and then disappeared, while we all tried not to die laughing. Edit. This was a local production of the musical. Christopher Plummer did not talk to me about his penis. Story 11. Acted in live theater in high school, so times would talk about what comes next in the Senesongek. Sometimes would just say random words. If we ran the scene over and over in rehearsal, wet about it, the last show would get a little gushy. Like, "Oh, I can't believe it's our last time doing this." It all depended on the day and time. Story 12. We had to film an About Us video for my business. The guy shooting the video wanted to do some filler shots, so he told me to just say peas and carrots and move my hands like I was talking. The entire shot looked like I was thinking because my eyes were looking upward and like Ricky Bobby, I didn't know what to do with my hands. Story 13. A good friend of mine and I found ourselves talking in the background. It was so hard not to bust up laughing as we mouthed back and forth. But really, my is huge, mine too. Takes so long to wash it, and like that. Story 14. Filmmaker here. Well, first off, it's pretty much standard that the extras mouth sentences or random words to look like they are talking in order not to disrupt the actor's lines. Most sets I've worked on, they are mouthing watermelon over and over. Fun fact: scenes where there is music playing and actors are talking on a dance floor are filmed in complete silence. Sometimes they will use a metronome to keep people on beat, but this is rare in my experience. Story 15. I worked as a background actor in Atlanta for a year. Basically, you can talk about anything and everything if it's an outdoor scene. You get paid to just meet new people. You get paid a regular 8-hour day pay, but any hours over that is time and a half, and if the day goes 14 to 16 hours, it's double. 70 of the time you get to eat the food the main actors are eating, and it's some of the most delicious stuff I have ever eaten. My favorite story is that I was eating literally the best chicken parmesan of my life on the set of the movie 42 about Jackie Robinson. It's 2012 and Chadwick Boseman Black Panther is eating next to me. I have literally zero idea who he is at the time. We're just talking normally and part ways. Few hours later I see him go to say hello, but I am stopped by a 53 type A personality with a clipboard and headset asking me, "Can I help you?" I tell her I was headed to wardrobe because I assumed she was stopping me because I looked like someone who just wandered into the movie. As I am saying this, I can see him next to Harrison Ford and a makeup crew. I realized, oh, Chad is actually playing Jackie. After I explained myself, she was cool and gave me a sparkling water. Weird day. Story 16. This isn't quite the same thing, but I was in high school production of Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. I didn't have any lines, but I stood around with my wife in the background through much of the play, so I would quietly talk with her. We had 2 performances, and in the first one she told me that when she turned 18 she was thinking about becoming a stripper at the local strip club. I was honestly shocked. I tried to give her reasons why she should maybe not do it. It was everything I could do to try to continue focusing on the play. The second performance, I continued trying to talk her out of it, but she full-on won me over. She said she wasn't ashamed of her body, she wanted to get through college debt-free, and she researched how much she could earn and figured she could cover her school expenses and living expenses for 4 years by working at the strip club a few nights a week. It made sense, and later I learned she did in fact become a stripper. But I don't know if she followed through on her school plans. I just Google searched her and found out she died about 3 years ago at age 43. Doesn't say why though. Story 17. A friend of mine, police officer, was a cop extra in a movie with Diane Lane and Colin Hanks called Untraceable. He was in the background of a scene with Colin Hanks' character talking to him. Colin Hanks produced some oven mitts from somewhere. Conversation was something along these lines: Colin Hanks, "You see these oven mitts? I am going to go in the kitchen, turn the oven to about 350 and put these mitts in for about 10 minutes. When they are done warming up I am going to come out here with them and cup your..." My friend lost it and they had to cut the scene. I can't remember if it is in the actual movie. Story 18. Obligatory, not an actor here, but a high school friend went on to be a professional extra to help pay for uni and also learn some industry tips. He was studying film and media. He told me a lot of times, "You aren't actually talking, just miming words." He said directors more want background actors to use body language to convey a conversation is happening rather than sound, because the sound gets added in post-production. Yes, a lot of the times he just mouths words like peas and carrots and pink and purple elephant over and over, but again directors encourage to have a proper conversation, just mouthed. My friend has mouthed stupid sentences at his conversation partner, and often they can't lip read, so the conversation is more likely this: "Hey, did you know the beaver is the national animal of Canada? Yes, I know that restaurant has some really nice dim sum. Soccer is my favorite sport. What's yours? Oh, I'm not a fan of Ed Sheeran, but I did like that song." Story 19. I live in LA, so I run into a lot of extras and would-be actors. A lot of them have told me that when conversing in the background, they're not actually making any noise. Story 20. I was an extra in the Ken Loach film Looking for Eric and was in the last scene for a second to the frame. It was a graduation scene and I was playing a student, and I had a couple in their mid-50s be my parents. That they were coming out with meant they were either method actors or they actually thought I was their son. At the end of the day, the lady seemed straight up offended that everything ID told them was bullshit. It's called acting. Story 21. I was told to act natural with my friend for a promotional advert, and we literally just had a conversation about how unnatural it is to try to act natural. Story 22. I was a background actor for a little bit, might be going back to it, but my favorite scene was actually a rave where we had to be completely silent as we danced. They were recording on-site audio for the actors' lines, and the music was to be added in post. So the set director would give us a beat, then we would have to dance in silence, with glow sticks and stereotypical rave clothing for up to 5 minutes at a time. Some girl had the brilliant idea to start pushing random people as we were jumping enthusiastically, and it turned into a mini silent pushing competition, attempting to convey things to each other only through facial expressions, and trying so hard not to laugh. Story 23. I do professional theater work. It varies, but typically we get into silly role plays in the background. Especially for a play with a longer run, you start to develop deep character stories for your random background person and play out random narratives with your castmates. Anything to keep it interesting. Oh, and the peas and carrots thing ends after high school. Once you go pro you try to at least improvise something vaguely real. Story 24 I was in a play, and one scene I was supposedly discussing troop positions with the king in the background. I would come up with some ludicrous tactics every time and talk about them at length with a poker face. We're trying the no cavalry method today, sire. Everyone has to neigh convincingly or we're doomed. My fellow actor only broke once. True professional. Story 25 for the most part we just pantomime talk. If we talk for real, it distracts the audience from the scene. If we do need to talk, we usually come up with a semi-scripted event and follow around that. However, this is just me and her experience. Story 26 how delicious and refined the drink is. Speaking pompously as if we were connoisseurs, mugs are almost always empty. And wine is the cheapest, grossest grape juice you can find. This was for a play, not a movie though, so we were actually expected to talk. Story 27 my dad did background for a movie when my sister first started acting. He was in it after the funeral scene, so everyone had to look like they were really torn up. My dad said he and the other guy he was talking to talked about sports and other random, all while whispering and shaking their heads every once in a while. Story 28 hey OP, do you realize you are the ancillary background character to my life with no dimension, lines, plot or story arc? See you never, I mean really, after this I will never meet you again my whole life. Pause, there it is, okay bye. Story 29 I was an extra for an Irish soap opera a couple of times. The only direction we got was to be silent, mouth our words and don't do it at the same time. With multiple takes, you found that your silent conversation started to become alive, your follow-on from the other person's facial body reactions. Actually got kind of difficult to do it over and over again, almost like you'd run out of things to say, but you'd enter a flow and each conversation would get closer to identical. I was paired once with this girl who got told off for overacting. She was mental, making a big deal of every emotion, Joey and Friends style. Thought this was her chance to get noticed. Like anyone's going to notice her gobbling down a burger in a diner in Fair City. Story 30 once during a Walla session, background chatter for VO the lights went off in a scene so the crowd had to sound surprised. I yelled who touched my butt, loudly enough for the director to notice. I got more actual auditions after that. Story 31 I was in a background for a movie once and I just was talking to the guy next to me about our mutual love of B-movies and how cool it was to finally be in one. Story 32 when me and my friend were on stage together during a scene where we had to make conversation in the background, we would argue about how to pronounce GIF. Story 33 I was on a show where a major actor was told to ad-lib his lines in Japanese. He was talking in the background, but his dialogue was in nearly every scene. They were going to translate it and add subtitles later. Not a single member of the crew spoke Japanese. He stood in front of us saying things like, hey, these bastards have no idea what I'm saying, I could be saying anything at all, please laugh now so they'll think I'm doing a good job. They did not subtitle his lines. Story 34 so one show, another actor and I are in the background reading what are meant to be museum catalogs but are actually copies of After 50, beyond the simple joke of that magazine being read by a couple actors in their early 20s. She soon points out another page and says I think I have to go to this, and I want you there with me. I glance over, she's pointing at an ad for a prostate clinic. Just before a cue happens in the scene in front of us requiring all but one actor to freeze, I look up to see her giving me a eating grin and have to force myself not to laugh and break the scene. It's one of my most treasured memories on stage. Story 35 I'm a professional stage actor and it depends. Sometimes we're just mumbling gibberish, sometimes we kind of develop our own lines. Some actors like to remain in character and talk about the action of the show, sometimes we just have real conversations, sometimes we're saying ridiculous stuff trying to make each other laugh. The last show I did had a very long and tedious scene with a small group of us in the background. We played hand charades under the table where the audience couldn't see. Story 36 I've worked a decent amount of background, but the funniest is dance or club scenes. They played the first couple seconds of Funky Town so we'd be on the same beat, then everyone has to dance in silence, a bunch of awkward bodies bumping to the tune of shuffling feet. If we're supposed to be talking, we usually improv something like, OMG you look fantastic after your abortion, what's your secret, on the traffic pattern run through, then mouth a similar conversation on a take. We background actors are aboard, dark-humored people. Story 37 usually it's either, do you think they'll be breaking for lunch soon, I don't know, what do you think will be on the menu, etc. etc. Or do you think they'll let us go home soon, I'm cold, hungry, tired, bored. Source have done extra work. Story 38 everyone repeating watermelon and peas and carrots over and over. Is no one casually silently quoting song lyrics or reading the script of a movie, and waiting for a viewer to discover this. Story 39 I do stage acting as opposed to movies, but we usually just have a conversation in character. Depending on the show you can sometimes be a little silly. I did a show where one of the musical numbers was a boy fantasizing about working at a hospital amongst sexy nurses. So anytime the song cut to dialogue, me and the other nurses had to talk in the background, would talk about ongoings in the hospital, like a patient who spontaneously combusted. Story 40 I've been an extra in a film, and the hardest part is talking silent, that's how it was done on this film, and keeping the conversation going back and forth. This guy and I would just talk silently, and then when one of us would near the end of our point he would do a head or wrist signal so that the other would know that when the talking stops it's time for him to start, and so on. Little games can then develop where you're trying to screw with each other, because you have no idea what the other is saying, so really you can say whatever you want and use little hand gestures to indicate what you're saying. And if you decide to talk about something random or obscene, it's basically challenging the other not to laugh when they realize what you're talking about. Good time. Story 41. It depends on your relationship with the other actors around you. In my experience, sometimes we're being super inappropriate and saying things like you're cute, wanna nice. One time I was in a scene like that with this huge guy who was like 3 times my size with huge muscles, and I was supposed to be cursing him out in the background. Sometimes I'd be saying I will murder your soul, I will destroy you, and sometimes I'd be all kittens and puppies and rainbows yahi. Sometimes it's just gibberish, you never know. Story 42. Stage actress, just hobby. Didn't have the ambition to pursue it big time, and the theaters here are generally small enough that you need to actually just have a conversation because some of the audience in the front can hear bits and pieces. Last show I was in had a ton of workplace downtime constantly in the background. One actress liked to just about everybody else on stage endlessly, another liked to point out fashion advertisements in a magazine. So we chatted about that, nothing revolutionary or groundbreaking, just people aimlessly filling the space in different ways. But man, that beat sure, I was worn out after that run finished. I know you think everybody else in the cast sucks. I know you didn't like your costume. I know. Oh, remember to smile. Story 43. Not exactly the answer, but I figure y'all will find it funny. In a production of Les Mis we had a rotating barricade. When Gavroche climbed over to go get bullets, we had to stay perfectly still as it rotated. Because there was a gap and you could see foot movement, this meant we could still move our upper bodies. So while this kid is picking up bullets, we're aiming our guns at him behind the barricade, pretending to be shooting him. Try not to laugh when someone mouths I got him, and you realize it was the guy who played Grantaire. Story 44. Acted in high school and in college a bit. While the fake background conversations were literally just small talk, whenever there was the reading of a letter on stage we always drew a penis on it. Story 45. I was doing background as a bank teller for a sketch comedy show. The person I was paired with kept talking dirty to see if she could get me to crack during a take. Story 46. I was once an extra in a promotional video for a company. Me and 2 others was standing with the camera pointing only at us. But you couldn't hear what we said. They told only me to tell a great joke to make everyone laugh. Thanks, that's really easy, no pre-assure. Story 47. I once played a very old respectable character in a classic show during my high school acting years. Naturally, while the background characters were miming and whispering peas and carrots, church star, etc., I took it upon myself a few times to liven things up by walking up to each of them, and saying the most vulgar, disgusting things I possibly could to try and throw them off, all while in character, never failed to make them crack huge smiles. Story 48. I was in the background of a music video once, talking to a model who would never have given me the time of day in real life. Because the song was being dubbed over the entire thing, we could talk about whatever we wanted. I was genuinely curious what the life of a beautiful model was like, so I picked her brain.
I turn out. Being born drop dead beautiful makes life pretty easy.
Story 49. As a background actor in TV and movies, it depends if we are told to pantomime or if we can just talk. If we are told to pantomime, look like you're speaking while speaking. I was once told by another person to repeat watermelon. Or you just mouth a random convo. If we can talk, it's usually just a casual conversation, or you joke around and kind of over-exaggerate the scene. Story 50. Is it bad to just have a conversation with someone? Like if I pretend the cameras aren't there and I just have a quiet talk with another actor, or is that frowned upon? Story 51. We weren't allowed to make any noise, so we had to pantomime conversations. I did a scene with one girl and we just mouthed the funniest dumbest. It was 18 years ago, so I can't remember exactly what we said. The movie was Boys Girls with Freddie Prinze Jr. Also, I remembered Mr. Prince smelled amazing. Story 52. I was an extra for night party scenes in Neighbors. It's a lot of downtime, a lot of flirting. Most of the extras were college-aged. A lot of people trying to show off how funny they are. When shooting, you might be having a conversation but you're not supposed to say anything for clean audio, so it's a lot of pretend conversation. Story 53. I was an extra working on Universal's Dracula Untold in Ireland a few years ago. We would just repeatedly ask each other, are you a real vampire? Yes, I'm a vampire. Story 54. Depends on the actor in live theater. Some just say nonsense, others come up with something related to what they're supposed to be talking about, and a dedicated subset make it their lives' mission to make their scene partner break. There is no held in laughter like I'm on a stage in front of hundreds of people and ruin the scene. Held in laughter. In film it's generally just mouthing weird bullshit at each other and pretending to be fascinated. Story 55. I was in a play where the director was just incredibly difficult to work with and the whole process was just a disaster. There was a scene where another actor and I had to walk along the back of the stage as if we were in the garden talking. Initially we just complained about the director, but it turned into discussions on how to somehow destroy the theater. It was actually great because we were building on each other's points, so we looked really engaged from the audience. Story 56. There's a lot of peas and carrots and celery said over and over in shows I've done. I also always find it fun to react to what the focal character's eyes are saying, and sometimes that's less than flattering. Honestly, many of the interesting conversations happen either in rehearsals, especially when the director isn't paying attention to you yet, and it's a massive gossip sesh, or backstage side stage. Story 57. My mom had this story about her and her friend going on a trip to Indonesia. They were walking on the streets of some city in Indonesia. They are both Danish. when a guy came over and asked if they would play a couple of oppressive Dutch people. It was some horrible new Indonesian TV show documentary about when Indonesia was under Dutch rule. Apparently Danish sounded kinda Dutch, and they were supposed to have a normal conversation in one of the scenes. It wasn't even in the background. So my mom and her friend just talked in Danish about how they really needed to take that conversation then ended up in the actual TV show. I would still love to be able to see that scene from that show. Anyone from Denmark would crack up if they saw it. Story 58. I've been an extra on The Librarians and Grimm. No actual talking. Also I noticed they weren't too fond of the more dramatic extras. The point is to not stick out. Story 59. Nothing. Mostly we're saying nothing. We're just mouthing common conversational words and phrases to force believable facial expressions and gesticulations. Really, that's right, no way. And then this happened and she said this, oh no, but thank you for asking. Story 60. I'm a stage actor. I do community theater in my area. Because you typically need to project to be heard on stage, I usually use a slightly below average volume and converse with the other person, normally in character, sometimes not. Story 61. There's a famous opera anecdote I had to ask my friend about. He says Michael Langdon was the writer who relates the story of two great sopranos whispering during a huge opera production, 65 years ago. Mr. Langdon thought Maria Callas and Giulietta Simeonato must have had some earth-shaking news in their lives, as the Egyptians sang and killed and wept. It was Covent Garden 1953 Ida. During the triumphal scene he could see spellbinding Callas and the great Giulietta Simeonato talking under their breath on stage. He was singing the part of the Pharaoh of Egypt, I think. He kept creeping closer to eavesdrop, and they were talking about the underwear sale at Marks & Spencer's. Story 62. I work as a mixer on cartoon shows, and sometimes on the American versions you can hear people saying Trump in the wall aha, but more often than not it's just gibberish. Story 63. Stage acting. Answer here, not movie. While performing The Revenge of the Space Pandas or Binky Ruddock and the Two-Speed Clock 1 during one scene where the Space Pandas were supposed to be milling around in the background talking, we picked through each other's fur and mimed eating parasites while muttering groom, groom, groom. But I'll admit that was a weird play. Also, despite being theoretically a children's play, it was full-bore mammoth speak, so you really had to pay attention because there were generally at least two conversations going on at once. Which means that your cue lines are often delivered by people you aren't talking to and have nothing to do with what you're saying, fun and nifty to watch, but a lot of work to get right so it flows smoothly and doesn't sound all broken up and unnatural. In most plays though you just move your mouth so it looks like you're talking but don't say anything. You don't want to distract your fellow actors too, so you try not to say stuff on stage that isn't scripted. A truly interesting weird play by David Mamet. Yes. The David Mamet, not some other guy by the same name that is ostensibly for kids, but depending on how you stage it is very much not for kids. We staged it the not for kids way. And had a really great looking pumpkin guillotine made by a metal sculptor who was the mother of one of the actors. Too well usually, when we were doing What the Butler Saw there's a scene where one character is supposedly naked behind a screen and causes the policeman who looks behind it a great deal of embarrassment. My girlfriend at the time was playing the character behind the screen and for the final performance she really was naked. The guy playing the policeman had a genuine expression of surprise and took a moment to remember his lines. There are times when distracting your fellow actors is exactly the right thing to do. Story 64. I have been a background actor on multiple occasions. Basically in every scene everyone is completely quiet except for the principal actors. The extras involved are pantomiming, think of a mime, meaning pretending to talk, etc. The directors of the scene will randomly pair you up with people they think will paint the scene in the best way or in their vision. So you're basically hanging out with a complete stranger pretending to talk or whatever. I've been in many musical performance scenes. The audience pretends to clap without actually making any noise. If someone makes a loud noise it can literally ruin the actor's dialogue and they will be forced to reshoot a scene. It's interesting for sure. Everything else is added in post, background sound, music, etc. Unfortunately when you become a background actor you will forever notice background actors and critique them if they are good or bad. It's hard not to be fixated on it. A single scene that will be less than a minute long often takes hours to shoot. Pay is also very low. Story 65. Most of the time it's just moving your mouth because you don't want to get in trouble and ruin the scene by making a noise. Which will lead you to getting replaced and possibly turned over by the extra casting places. What's funnier is every movie where there's a dance party scene or a club scene, they play music for like 20 seconds, everyone starts dancing, then they cut the music and start the scene and everyone keeps dancing in silence. Shit's hilarious. Story 66. I've done background work in the past. You're essentially just a set piece. You're supposed to act like you're talking but you shouldn't be making any sound. It's really weird to do a bar or dance club scene because there is no music playing. Next time you watch a show or movie with a dance club scene you'll notice the people on the dance floor all dancing out of sync. Also, the alcoholic beverages are apple grape juice. I did background on Law & Order. I portrayed a detective and had to pretend that I was reading a file. It was a bunch of random paperwork from a 1980s mortgage. Story 67. A unique perspective, but for many years as a kid I was an extra in large ballet productions for a pretty prominent ballet company. Non-dancing roles. I'd be village woman, marketplace lady, beggar ball attendee. Our job was to make the scene come alive so the village or ball or what have you seemed bustling and lively while all the dancing happened. We were meant to react to the environment and react to the action in that airy ballet type way. Well, large ballet productions like that are anything but silent. There are all manner of little jokes going on in the back and fooling around, especially in the production where I was a beggar. I was 16 and there were 6 of us teens paired with 6 or so 20-something men from the company. Our job was just to go around and create mischief, beg for money, harass people in the background, create alternate storylines for ourselves, and try not to get caught cracking or goofing off while also trying to flirt with the beggar boys. It's always the time of my life. Story 68. I was on Game of Thrones set dressing props, and when Jaime Lannister was getting pulled down the hill at Robb Stark's camp, all the extras were just shouting dickhead and so on. When the director said cut, everybody was laughing, even Jaime Lannister. Story 69. Obligatory. Not an actor. A while back they came to my high school and interviewed all the senior prefects, including myself. They took each of us aside briefly and just told us to talk about whatever in the background. Ended up talking to my business teacher about why Chihuahuas are evil. When we were filming Threat Level Midnight, Mr. Scott had us mouth the ABCs like someone from Canada. Story 70. Stage actor here. Currently on tour with a musical. The conversations usually are an attempt to make a fellow cast member laugh right before they have their next line musical number. Story 71 was an extra in a few shows, and in all of mine we weren't even supposed to talk that way. They could get the main actor's dialogue recorded. You really just mouth random conversations. Same thing in dance scenes, which is awkward because you're dancing to no music. Story 72. Musical theater. I try to always keep the talk relevant to the scene, but not necessarily canon. This opens up a lot of opportunities for fake gossip and funny parodies of the scene or characters we are working with. Story 73. 10 years ago, I played some role in a play in high school. I remember I was in a background conversation in one scene, and we said watermelon over and over. Story 74. Did theater in high school and university. In high school it was usually pantomime silence, as the leads couldn't be trusted to speak over a general hubbub that actual background speaking would cause. In university, it was almost always either a continuation of a conversation we had been having backstage before coming on, or discussion about what we were planning on doing for dinner after the practice play.